welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into the complete cinematic experimental video on the Beckmann rearrangement presented by Dr. Chem. We're going to take what might sound like a dense organic chemistry concept at first and reveal the absolutely fascinating story of scientific serendipity and precise molecular choreography behind it. If you're a seasoned synthetic chemist or just someone fascinated by how the molecular building blocks of our modern world are snapped together, you are definitely in for a treat.
I mean, we are looking at an organic reaction that is so elegant, so incredibly dependable, and so historically significant that it was actually dubbed the Mona Lisa of rearrangements in a 2013 presentation. This is literally the reaction that bridges the gap between theoretical physical chemistry and massive global industrial applications. So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The serendipitous discovery. 2. Unlocking the mechanism. 3. The rules of stereospecificity. 4. Protocols and troubleshooting. And 5. Real-world applications. Let's get right to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the serendipitous discovery.
We're rewinding the clock back to the 1880s to see how a completely routine laboratory test went wonderfully wrong. Now, chemists Victor Meyer and Alois Janney had just discovered oximes, but the real game-changer hit in 1886. Ernst Otto Beckmann was simply trying to find a reliable way to distinguish between aldehydes and ketones. To do this, he tests a compound called benzophone oxime using a pretty harsh reagent, phosphorus pentachloride. He's expecting a standard, predictable result, right? Instead, boom, total molecular reshuffling. He accidentally created a rearranged N-substituted amide, specifically benzanilide. An absolute accident that permanently changed organic chemistry.
Moving right along to Section 2, unlocking the mechanism.
So, how do we get this molecular reshuffling from start to finish? Well, the whole thing is built on this incredibly efficient synthesis workflow for preparing the oxime. You have to build it before you can rearrange it. By reacting benzophenone with hydroxamine hydrochloride in an ethanol and water mix, and then just hitting it with a base and a little bit of heat, it's basically magic. This is a foundational lab procedure because you regularly hit near quantitative yields. We're talking 98 to 99% pure product, just by reflexing it for 5 minutes and crashing it out in acidic water. Once you've got that oxime in hand, the rearrangement itself is this beautifully coordinated 4-step dance. Step 1, an acid catalyst comes in and protonates the oxime's hydroxyl group, which basically turns it into an elite leaving group, water. With that water molecule primed and ready to bail, Step 2 kicks in, a concerted migration where the anti-periplanar group shifts straight over to the electron-deficient nitrogen. That drops us at Step 3, forming a nitrilium ion intermediate. Finally, Step 4, hydrolysis. Water attacks that intermediate, and after a quick proton transfer, you are left with your final N-substituted amide. It is such a clean, elegant process. All right, let's get into Section 3, the rules of stereospecificity. Geometry absolutely dictates destiny here. The golden rule you have to remember for the Beckmann rearrangement is anti-periplanar migration. In plain English, the chemical group sitting geometrically opposite to our leaving group, that water we just talked about, is always the one forced to migrate to the nitrogen atom. Take acetaphone oxime as an example. If you have the E isomer, the phenyl group is opposite the hydroxyl, so it's forced to migrate, giving you acid-analyde. But flip it to the Z isomer, the methyl group is opposite, so it migrates, completely changing the game and yielding N-phenylacetamide. And this geometric rule is insanely rigid. It's so predictable that if you walk into the lab and start an experiment with exactly an 80-20 mixture of those E and Z isomers, your final resulting amides are going to perfectly mirror that exact 80-20 ratio. The molecule doesn't just scramble randomly. It strictly follows physical laws.
Which brings us to Section 4, protocols and troubleshooting.
Look, just like any delicate microscopic dance, your laboratory conditions have got to be perfectly tuned. Standard protocols demand specific acid catalysts to get the gears turning, stuff like thionyl chloride, tosyl chloride, or strong sulfuric acid. Now, this reaction gets pretty intense, which means it requires careful, highly exothermic base neutralization. We're talking pouring the mix over ice and a base to quench it safely. Because if your conditions are too harsh or left unchecked, you run the massive risk of unwanted E/Z isomerization. Your starting materials could flip their geometry before they rearrange, and poof, there goes that beautiful stereospecificity we just admired. And that leads to the ultimate troubleshooting nightmare, the dreaded Beckmann fragmentation. This is an abnormal competing reaction. Basically, if the migrating group can form a highly stable carbocation instead, the whole molecule just breaks apart. It fragments.
So instead of gracefully rearranging into your desired amide, it shatters into a nitrile and a carbocation byproduct. Picking the exact right promoting reagent and solvent is absolutely crucial to keep the reaction on track and avoid this trap.
Finally, let's look at the big picture in Section 5, real-world applications.
Commercially speaking, this reaction is a total titan. We're talking about the archetypal conversion of cyclohexanone into caprolactam. Why should you care? Because caprolactam is the essential feedstock for the entire global production of nylon 6. This single, accidental chemical pathway is literally the reason we have the fibers in our carpets, the plastics in our car parts, and the textiles we wear every single day.
But it doesn't stop at industrial plastics. The modern medicinal potential here is mind-blowing. Recent research synthesizes novel benzophenone derivatives using these very pathways to create extremely potent anti-tumor agents. Just take a look at these IC50 values. We're talking 0.48 micromolar against leukemia cell lines and a staggering 0.26 micromolar against hepatocarcinoma. Those are remarkably low numbers for cancer-fighting compounds. And beyond cancer, these exact same derivatives are stepping up as phenomenal dual-action anti-inflammatory agents. They step right into the arachidonic acid pathway and successfully block critical enzymes like SPLA2 and LOX. By hitting those central nodes, they basically flip the switch off, stopping the body from churning out the prostaglandins and leukotrienes that drive harmful inflammation.
Which leaves us with a pretty thrilling question to wrap up today's explainer. If Ernst Otto Beckmann's complete accident in a German lab back in 1886 ended up giving us the plastics that built the 20th century and the targeted anti-tumor therapies of the 21st, what other world-changing materials and life-saving medicines are quietly waiting to be unlocked from the happy accidents of chemistry's past? It's wild to think about. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next one.